There are moments when the night goes too quiet, when the stars blink, and something blinks back. Across the world, from classified files to whispered confessions, a pattern has emerged. Encounters that were never meant to be remembered. This is not just a story. This is not just a movie. This is a collision between cinema and reality. Welcome to Cinematic Encounters. Tonight, we begin with Episode 1. The encounter, he saw it, and everything changed. The desert stretched silent beneath a starless sky, vast and void, as if the world had momentarily forgotten to breathe. A single truck rolled down the forgotten lanes of Route 17, its headlights carving thin lines into the dust. Ethan Cross sat behind the wheel, eyes half on the road, half on the small radar unit flickering beside him. He had spent years watching signals, patterns, frequencies. But tonight's readings were unlike anything he'd seen. A quiet pulse, stuttering and distorted, blinking like a heartbeat lost in static. He slowed the truck, gaze drawn upward. No clouds. No wind. No stars. The night had turned unnaturally black. Then it appeared silent, massive, and motionless. A triangular craft hung in the sky, its surface darker than the void itself, edges sharp and unnatural, as though reality had been folded to let it through. At its center glowed a pale, pulsing light, soft, cold, and alive. Ethan stepped out of the truck. There was no sound. No insects. No breeze. The world felt paused. His breath came shallow, as if the air resisted entering his lungs. Somewhere in the back of his mind, instinct screamed, but it was muffled like a dream he couldn't wake from. The craft didn't move, yet its presence pressed down on him. Not visually. Not physically. But somewhere deeper into his bones, his thoughts. His skin prickled, as if thousands of eyes stared through him, past him, into parts of him he never knew were visible. He tried to speak. Nothing came. Then the radar shut off. The light dimmed. And somewhere nearby, a shape emerged. No sound announced its presence. No footsteps on gravel. But it was there, tall, thin, dressed in black, standing beneath an old road sign. Another one stood beside it. They didn't move. They didn't speak. Their faces were shadows. Ethan blinked. And they were gone. Only the triangle remained, now retreating into the stars with impossible grace. The wind returned. A single insect chirped. The world exhaled. Ethan climbed back into the truck, hands trembling. The radar rebooted blank. His phone lay dark and cracked. His own reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, as if something subtle had shifted within him. He didn't know what he had seen, but it had seen him. 2 days passed, and reality grew thin. Ethan moved through the hours like a shadow of himself. Sleep came in fragments. Light hurt his eyes, and time felt warped too fast in some moments, agonizingly slow in others. Food lost taste. Music, once a comfort, now echoed hollow. His world had become a waiting room, but he didn't know for what. He hadn't told anyone about the night sky, about the triangle that floated above the world, about the way the air had stopped moving. He hadn't even written it down. Something deep inside warned him that to speak it aloud would invite it back. Yet it had never truly left. The signs were subtle at first. His dog refused to enter the living room. The lights flickered at 3:17 a.m. every night exactly. The TV powered on by itself, showing only static. And the static pulsed. Not randomly, but with rhythm. Almost language. Mirrors no longer felt safe. They reflected not just his face but an emotion that did not belong to him. Once, while brushing his teeth, he caught sight of a figure standing behind him in the glass. Tall, motionless, featureless. But when he turned, there was nothing there. The presence grew heavier with each hour, like the sky was pressing down. The world felt surveilled, not watched but scanned. And then, on the third night, the knock came. 3 soft taps. They did not echo, yet they rang louder than thunder. He opened the door before realizing he had moved. It was not curiosity that drove him, it was something quieter, colder. Resignation. They stood there. 2 men in immaculate black suits. Identical. Not similar, identical. Pale skin without blemish or tone. Thin lips stretched in emotionless symmetry. Eyes dark as oil, too still to be human. They did not blink. The taller one held something in his hand, a small metal case. He did not open it. He did not explain it. But Ethan felt it in his bones, as though it were pointed at his memories. As if it were sifting through them. The other stepped forward. Not a step. A slide. Soundless. Too fluid. His presence brought cold, not like weather, but like vacuum, an absence of air, of warmth, of meaning. They said nothing. They asked nothing. Yet he felt questioned, interrogated, dismantled. Thoughts unraveled. Memories shuffled. His knees weakened under a weight that wasn't physical. One of them reached into his coat and pulled out a small black book. He flipped through it slowly, each blank page revealing something Ethan could not see, but could feel. The turning pages whispered through the air, like voices speaking backwards. Then, without a word, they turned. They walked away from the porch, and the porch lights flickered out as they passed. Ethan stepped into the night air. The stars were gone again. Only the dark remained. And when he looked down, he saw his hand still gripping the doorknob, knuckles white, fingernails half-mooned into flesh. He hadn't moved. But the house had grown colder. The next morning, his phone showed no call history. The surveillance cameras held no footage. His watch had stopped at the moment of the knock 3:17 a.m. precisely. But on the hallway wall, where none should be, there was now a print. A smudge. Two parallel streaks. Like fingertips pressed against the surface of time. Morning returned, but it brought no clarity. Sunlight fell across Ethan's floor like dust, dull and detached, as though it too had forgotten its purpose. The house was quiet, not peaceful, but hollow. A quiet that hummed beneath surfaces, like something breathing behind the walls. He stood in the kitchen, staring at a pot of coffee he couldn't remember brewing. The scent was strong, bitter, but he didn't feel the warmth of it. The mug in his hand was already half empty. He had no memory of lifting it. When he reached for his keys, they weren't where he left them. Nor was his watch. Nor the radio scanner he'd used for years. Every drawer he opened was half wrong. Items missing. Others misplaced. His journal was gone entirely. So were the two sketches he'd drawn of the triangle in the sky. In their place, a folded napkin with a faint, circular stain, and no writing at all. He walked through his home as if exploring a replica of it. The floor creaked in places it never had. Light bulbs flickered, even though they were new. His reflection in the hallway mirror lingered half a second too long after he turned away. But the worst came in his sleep. Or what was left of it. He dreamed of empty fields beneath swirling skies, of faceless men speaking in tones without words. He woke drenched in sweat, the air around him metallic. The hum had returned not from outside, but from inside his skull. He tried to remember the sequence of events. The truck. The radar. The triangle. The men at the door. But the order dissolved. Some moments repeated. Others blurred together. He no longer trusted his own mind. When he turned on the TV, the screen showed no channels. Only static. But behind the static, faintly just barely there was motion. Not patterns. Shapes. A triangle, pulsing slowly in and out of the snow. He shut it off. That afternoon, a man from the phone company arrived without appointment. Said he was there to check the lines. He wore no badge, no company name on his shirt. His clipboard held only a single blank page. When Ethan asked him a question, the man simply smiled and continued to trace the wires around the house with a device that made no sound. He left without saying goodbye. And later that night, Ethan noticed something strange about the wall above his bed. It had never been cracked before. But now, a thin line split the plaster, curving gently, perfectly, like the arc of a symbol half remembered from a dream. He tried to photograph it. His phone wouldn't turn on. The battery showed full. Still, it remained dead. He sat on the floor, surrounded by a house he no longer recognized. His memories were unraveling thread by thread. But in their place, something else was being stitched. Not thoughts. Not images. More like instructions. Signals. Coordinates. And always, the feeling returned. Not fear. Not paranoia. But proximity. Something was still here. Something that had never left. Watching from behind the veil. Marking him not as witness, but as a message. 3 nights had passed since the visit. Ethan no longer looked for answers in conversation. The world outside moved forward, unchanged in its distractions. Cars hummed, radios played, newspapers printed headlines that didn't matter. But inside, he drifted between moments with the disoriented stillness of someone living inside a riddle. The crack above his bed had deepened. It now curled downward, branching like a vein, or a root. He began to feel its presence more than see it. Whenever he entered the room, the air beneath it would feel different, subtly pressured, faintly electric. In the basement, he searched for a box of old recordings, his father's tapes, mostly static and shortwave scans. But what he found instead was something else, a small, matte black object, no larger than a matchbox, wedged behind a forgotten beam. Smooth. Cold. No seams, no buttons, no weight. He didn't remember owning it. He didn't remember placing it there. Yet it felt familiar. Not like memory, but like recognition. The way one recognizes a face from a dream. He set it on the kitchen table. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights dimmed. Not flickered, dimmed, uniformly, as though the entire house had inhaled. The object pulsed once with a soft white glow. Ethan stepped back, but didn't run. The glow faded, and in its place came sound. Faint at first, like static caught underwater. Then a tone emerged, low and constant, not mechanical, but deliberate. It resonated not through the air, but through the spine. A frequency of thought, not hearing. He scrambled to hook up his old receiver, the one he hadn't touched in years. Antennas, dials, cables snaking across the floor. As soon as the coil connected to the object, the tone sharpened into a series of structured pulses. Not random. Rhythmic. Morse. No. More complex. He recorded them. 10 minutes in, the light surged again. A picture frame fell from the wall. The dog across the street began barking and did not stop. When he slowed the pulses on playback, Ethan heard something impossible. Not language, but shape. The pulses, when visualized, drew patterns, curves, nodes, arcs within arcs. A design repeated across thousands of signals. Like a map not of geography, but of memory. A path made of information. He tried uploading the pattern into a spectrum analyzer. The result was meaningless until he layered it with an infrared satellite image of his region, downloaded from a public archive 5 years out of date. The pattern matched. Not perfectly, but precisely enough to form a ring 15 miles wide, encircling his town. At each nodal point, a structure. An antenna. A water tower. An abandoned field once used for military testing. He zoomed into an empty farmhouse north of the ridge. And paused. In the satellite image, near the center of that field, a shadow. A triangle. Too perfect. Too dark. He blinked. The image refreshed. The shadow was gone. He replayed the file. The triangle returned. Then vanished again. A presence hiding in frames between frames. Ethan stood in silence. The pulsing resumed. And now, it came not from the object, but from the walls. The table began to vibrate, subtly, as if acknowledging its purpose had ended. He reached for the black device, but it was no longer warm. No longer glowing. It had become inert. A shell. But the signal continued now from somewhere else. Outside. Close. Moving. He turned toward the window, drawn by a pressure behind his eyes. Beyond the tree line, across the fields, the sky shimmered. Not light. Not cloud. But motion without form, like heat above asphalt, yet in the cold of night. Something was awakening. Not in the sky. Beneath it. The clock struck midnight, but Ethan hadn't looked at it. Time had stopped having meaning. The night had thickened around his home like oil poured over a flame, dense, black, and soundless. Even the crickets had abandoned their rhythm, as if the land itself held its breath. He sat on the edge of his bed, fully clothed, staring at nothing. A dull ache had settled at the base of his skull, like pressure, or memory, building up without release. The radio had long since gone silent. The black object on his table remained cold and dead. But the pattern it had revealed still burned in his mind, as vivid as blood on snow. Then came the vibration. Not from any device, but from the house itself. A subtle hum rising through the floorboards. It had no pitch, no tone, just presence. Like something beneath him had stirred. He stood, moved toward the window. The fields were bathed in moonlight. Nothing stirred. Yet the shadows looked wrong, stretched too long, bending in directions no light should allow. Trees leaned, not with wind, but as if drawn towards something in the air. As if gravity had changed its shape. Then the lights failed. All at once. The hum deepened. Ethan turned toward the hallway, heart pounding now, unsure if it was fear or something else. A low pulse echoed through the walls, one beat every 3 seconds. Not mechanical. Not human. Living. He reached for the flashlight in the drawer. Gone. The pulse grew louder. Now it was inside his ears. His vision shimmered. The world tilted. Then came the knock. But this time, it wasn't on the door. It came from the back wall of his bedroom. 3 slow knocks. Perfectly spaced. No source. He didn't move. Couldn't. A shadow passed across the mirror. He didn't own a mirror in this room. Then, from behind him, soft static began to rise like the background noise of the universe, pushed into the shape of a whisper. It came from nowhere, and everywhere. And then light. Not bright. Not warm. But gray, like the inside of a storm cloud. A shape emerged. Human in outline, but not in essence. Tall, still, and draped in something darker than the dark around it. Its face was featureless, but its presence pressed against Ethan's chest like the memory of drowning. He didn't scream. The air was too thick. He tried to step back, but his legs no longer belonged to him. The floor fell away from his feet, yet he remained standing. Time bent again. 1 second became a minute, then folded back into itself. The figure raised a hand. No fingers. Just outline. Behind it, 2 others appeared. All motionless. Their forms blurred at the edges, unstable, as if reality had rejected them but couldn't remove them. Then, a sound. Not words, but a language made from thought. It entered him, not through ears, but directly into the mind, pure meaning, without noise. You are marked. The message was clear. Final. Without question or threat. This is not forgotten. And then they vanished. Not into smoke. Not into light. They simply ceased to exist in front of him. Ethan collapsed to the floor. Not from fear, but exhaustion. His body had held too long. When he awoke, hours later or perhaps moments, he found himself on the couch in the living room, covered in a blanket he didn't own. The lights were back. The clock ticked. Birds chirped outside. Everything was normal. Except the hallway mirror was shattered. Except his hair had turned a shade paler. Except the word remember had been etched into the inside of the window pane. Backward, as if written from outside. The world moved, but no longer in a language Ethan understood. Days passed at least, the sky changed but time had lost continuity. Hours disappeared without memory. He would blink and find himself standing in places he didn't remember walking to, the field behind his house, the edge of the old highway, the cellar door wide open though he never touched it. Technology had turned against him, not violently, but absently. His phone refused to recognize his fingerprint. His television, once just static, now emitted long tones at 4:07 a.m. precisely. His laptop displayed text he didn't type, strings of symbols, some familiar, others ancient. He unplugged it all. Still, the static returned. Not from machines, but from walls. From lights. From his own thoughts. A low frequency, constant now, humming just below his hearing. He pressed his hands against his ears. It didn't help. And then came the silence. Not peaceful, hollow. Like something vast had stopped breathing. That morning, he walked to town. Or tried to. No cars passed him. No birds flew overhead. No insects stirred. When he reached the gas station, the doors were locked. the inside empty. A humming freezer buzzed in a rhythm that mimicked the same pulses from the black device. At the post office, the lights were on, but there was no one there. A radio behind the counter played faint music, but the melody was reversed, warped. He called out. No answer. Even the stray dog that usually followed him at a distance was gone. Ethan wasn't alone. But he was not among people anymore. Back home, he stood in front of the mirror, staring into himself for nearly an hour. His eyes no longer felt like his. The pupils dilated at odd intervals. There was a faint shimmer beneath his skin, like something flickering just under the surface. And then it happened. His ears began to ring. Not a sharp pain, but a note, clear and pure, vibrating through his skull. He fell to the floor, not from dizziness, but from a sudden weight, internal, gravitational. As if some part of him had become denser. He opened his eyes. And saw nothing. Not black. Not dark. Just absence. His body lay still. But his mind drifted. Pulled, not upward, but inward, spiraling toward a center he didn't know existed. And there, in the stillness, a voice emerged. Not a sound. Not a thought. But recognition. We are in you. He gasped, awake on the floor, sweat cold on his skin. The room unchanged. The house silent. But beneath the silence, a pulse. Not from outside. But inside him. In the crook of his arm, veins pulsed in a rhythm too mechanical. His heartbeat no longer aligned with his breath. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. Only the faint hiss of static. He had become the signal. Some say the truth is out there. But what if the truth has already seen you? What Ethan witnessed wasn't just an encounter, it was an invitation. A warning. And now, something is still watching, from behind the static, beneath the silence, waiting for the next moment to be remembered. If you've felt that presence too, then this story is yours. Subscribe now, not just to follow the journey, but to protect the pieces of truth they've tried to erase. This is Cinematic Encounters. And what's coming next was never meant to be seen.